It was just Liberation Day. And during Liberation Day, Donald Trump decided to announce that he is going to implement more tariffs. Now, there has been a retaliation response, and we now have breaking news that just came through about 2 hours ago. Everybody get a hold of this. The stock market has just plunged as Wall Street is reacting to Donald Trump's tariffs. Let's get into this. This is breaking news. Buckle up. It's about to get tight.
This is CNN Breaking News.
And we begin with the breaking news from Wall Street. Trading has been underway now for just about 30 minutes, and nervous investors, very nervous investors, are weighing in on President Trump's historic new global tariffs. The early assessment, deep concerns. Almost all goods entering the United States will face a new tax of at least 10%, and that means inflation-weary Americans will see even higher prices on virtually everything. And that adds to the deepening concerns among economists that the U.S. and indeed much of the world may be on a collision course with a recession. Let's begin this hour with CNN business and politics correspondent Vanessa Yurkevich. She's in New York watching all of this unfold. So Vanessa, where do the markets stand right now?
Wolf, markets are tumbling as investors are really digesting worse than expected tariffs. You have the Dow, the NASDAQ, and the S&P all down below, as you can see there, 3%. Retail stocks in particular really selling off. Nike, Adidas, Lululemon, these are companies that source a lot of their goods from abroad, countries that are now under higher tariffs. And just look at the countries that were hit in yesterday's announcement. You have the European Union, 20% tariff. You have Japan, 24%, China, 34%, and Vietnam, 46%. Key trading partners to the U.S. Investors are worried what this means for businesses.
Yes, they are very worried, and they should be worried what this means for businesses. So everybody take a look at these numbers here. 20% for the European Union, 24% for Japan, 26% for South Korea, 34% for China, 46% for Vietnam. So I just want to remind everybody, it's really interesting because just a couple of days ago, Richard Wolff was here on this show, and he predicted that we will have a recession this year. Now, I know that some people may say, well, economists always say this or whatever, but Richard Wolff has been spot on about this before in the past. So I find it interesting that he made that prediction just a couple of days ago on the show. If you haven't seen the video, watch it when you get a chance. It's called There Will Be a Recession This Year with Professor Richard Wolff. Just a couple of days ago, he said that on the show, and now you see what is happening. Listen, these tariffs are no joke. People have to remember we don't make much here in the United States, even when it comes to some of the products that say, oh, it's sold here, it's a mom and pop store. People have to remember a lot of the materials oftentimes come from other countries because manufacturing is not what it used to be in this country. So we have to keep that in mind. Yes, the prices are going to increase. I warned everybody about this. I remember people told me that like, oh no, it's just a game that Donald Trump is playing. No, it's not just a game. As you can see, the stock market has just plunged. You can see this is Wall Street's response to this. Prices will increase on everything. And you may think it's just going to be something that you may not purchase, right? No, that's not how this works because the materials are not here. Whether it's the plastics, whether it's something like nickel, silver, we're getting these materials from other countries, and we have been doing so for quite some time. So buckle up, folks. We're looking at total chaos. It's only April. It's crazy.
And then, of course, those businesses' profits. But let's just reset. What do we know right now? We know that there are auto tariffs in effect right now. But coming on Saturday is that 10% universal tariff on Wednesday, higher tariffs on about 60 countries, tariffs on auto parts, foreign auto parts on May 3rd, and then maybe coming additional tariffs on lumber, semiconductors, and I'll add.
Okay, let's pause here for just a second. If you have a car payment, you need to pay attention right now. One thing that could be impacted because of these tariffs, they mention auto parts, but they also need to mention your car payment. That could increase. So everybody just take a look for a second and ask yourself, can you afford a higher car payment? All of these things are increasing. Everyone will be impacted. The question is whether or not you can afford to pay more. So take a look at that, folks. 10% across the board tariffs go into effect this Saturday. Wednesday, higher tariffs on some countries take effect. May 3rd, tariffs on auto parts, tariffs on lumber, semiconductors to be determined. So think about people that work in these businesses as well. Think about people that work at auto part dealerships, right? Think about mechanics. Think about people that live in Maine, and a lot of people that live in Maine work in lumber. So these materials are going to be more expensive for them to purchase.
Add copper there as well. And as you mentioned, Wolf, there is talk of what this could mean for a recession. I just spoke to an analyst who says that the longer that these tariffs stay in place, the more likely that there will be a recession. We also heard from Mark Zandi from Moody's Analytics, who said if they follow through, if these tariffs go into effect, I'd buckle up and brace for impact. A recession seems more likely than not. Wolf?
All right, Vanessa Yurkevich in New York for us. Thank you very much, Pamela.
Well, Wolf, the White House and Republican lawmakers concede that the ripple effect of the tariffs will cause some pain to Americans. But the White House says it's the initial cost to revive manufacturing jobs in the U.S. Here's what the vice president said this morning.
For 40 years, we've had an economy that rewards people who ship American jobs overseas and raises taxes on American workers, and we're flipping that on its head. We're going to cut taxes for American workers and for American companies that build here. We're going to make it harder to ship American jobs overseas. It's a total shift in the way that we've done economic policy in the United States of America, but it was necessary.
All right, let's go live now to CNN White House reporter Elena Trina. Elena, what else are you hearing from the administration this morning?
Well, Pamela, it's clear that the White House has been very intentional in its messaging. You know, despite some of the president's defenders, Republicans on Capitol Hill, others who have argued that the president is a pragmatist at heart, that perhaps he would pull back on some of these tariffs, it's clear they were wrong. The president was serious about this. And as Vance just laid out, and as we've heard from other top advisors this morning, he is committed to these tariffs really because he fundamentally believes the United States is getting taken advantage of, and he wants to really break the trading system that has been built over the last 70 or 80 years now and see this realignment. Now, we heard from Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt this morning. She was speaking with CNN. She said that, you know, this isn't going to be a negotiation. This is a national emergency. Listen to how she put it.
The president is firm in his approach, and the president is ensuring economic stability here in the United States of America. This is a common sense policy, and if these countries wanted to negotiate, if these countries wanted to do what's right, they've had 70 years to do it.
I think, Pamela,
there is some people understand that. Some people have also said that, like, well, if the countries were willing to negotiate earlier, wouldn't be in the situation. But the reality is, I guess the way that Trump kind of sees it is that Americans may feel some pain for a short period of time, but it'll all work out in the end. Okay. The problem is a lot of people can't afford to feel any type of pain right now. So when we talk about the car payments, for example, cars were already expensive prior to these tariffs. We're talking about auto parts as well. Just think about the fact if something happens to your car and you do have to take it to the shop and they have to replace the auto part, it is going to be more expensive than it currently is because of the tariffs on the auto parts. A lot of people may not realize this, but we get a lot of our auto parts from Mexico. People keep saying China. We get stuff from all these countries, Canada, Mexico, South Korea, Japan. As you can see, again, we don't produce much here in this country. So that's another way that you could be impacted. I'm also starting to think about gas. Like, we cannot afford to go through this again. At the same time, part of me wonders if this is what needs to happen in order for people to really, really get out in the streets for a full-on freaking economic movement. And I say that because I really do truly believe that it is going to take a complete collapse for everyone to finally say, wait a minute. Maybe this is not about red versus blue. Maybe this is about greedy ass people crushing all of us at the bottom. But I think that's what it's going to take. And I think Everyone that is working class is going to have to be impacted. It's not going to be just, Black people, Latino. It's going to be everyone who is working class is going to be impacted. And I think that's what it's really going to take to get that type of economic movement like out in the streets. Let's continue on a little bit more here.
The end of her answer there, saying they had 70 years to negotiate, is really key here, because that's the question now. Where do we go from here? We're going to see, as Vanessa just laid out, all of these different countries likely respond and in kind to these tariffs and retaliate. That could further escalate this trade war now. And so that's really the key question. One thing as well, just as we watch the stock market, is that the president has been far less reactionary to how the stock market is in this term, in his second administration, than in his first. We have been told repeatedly now not to see him react to the stock market directly because of this. Instead, he has said repeatedly now that he believes there will be some short-term pain. So I'd keep that in mind as well as we cover this. Pamela?
All right, Elena Treen, thank you so much. Wolf?
So see, he's even admitting it. He's telling you there's going to be short-term pain. The question is, how short will that be, right? And just a reality, like if you're talking about prices increasing on everything, we were already complaining for over a year about the cost of groceries. Now we're talking about prices increasing on everything else. Anybody getting a raise anytime soon? Anybody? Interesting times.
All right, Pamela, as we mentioned, analysts now say that President Trump's tariffs will likely plunge the global economy into recession this year. Some countries say they're hoping they can negotiate with the U.S., while others have vowed swift retaliation. Listen.
で、アメリカ政府に対しましては、これまで
We had been requesting the U.S. government to review its unilateral tariff measures at various levels, and we are extremely disappointed and regret that such measures have been implemented nonetheless.
Our intention remains to secure a deal, but nothing is off the table.
We will continue to make the strongest case for these unjustified tariffs to be removed from our exporters.
We are going to fight these tariffs with countermeasures. We are going to protect our workers.
The entire global economy will suffer from these ill-considered decisions.
Stock markets across Asia have already tumbled after President Trump's announcement. Now China has vowed to counter what it calls bullying tariffs by the United States. I'm going to go live to Beijing. CNN's Mark Stewart is on the scene for us. Mark, what kind of retaliation potentially could we see from China?
Right, Wolf, good morning. China says it is ready to fight back, but if this is a war, it's not necessarily revealing its plans about how and when it will strike. It certainly has the option, though, of continuing on the tariff theme by instituting more tariffs, more punishment, specifically targeting American farmers. Right now, China imports a lot of soybeans from the United States. There are existing tariffs. Certainly, China could double down on that. But
Pause. Guys, it's about to get messy. Now we're talking about the farmers. So once again, even the farmers in this country are receiving soybeans from China. Again, we don't produce much here. So that's going to be, the soybeans are going to be more expensive. Farmers don't make a lot of money. Let's just keep it real. If anybody in the chat ever grew up on the farm, you know. And then we get our food from the farmers. I mean, it's a domino effect. It's going to impact like all of us. Another thing I want to mention, which I think you might be surprised by, they even implemented tariffs on Israel. When I say they hit everybody, they hit everybody. They were not trying to be picky with this. So a lot of people are mentioning China, and I don't think they mentioned this in this segment either. A lot of people are mentioning China. I just want to let you know they even put tariffs on Israel as well. Yes, sir.
It's been interesting all day today. China's been very much taking on this diplomatic tone, talking about themes of resolving differences, urging the United States to cancel the tariffs. So it's kind of this wait and see mode as this April 9th deadline approaches. There is certainly an economic side to all of this, but there's also a lot of ego involved. Both Xi Jinping and Donald Trump want to look strong on the world stage. As one analyst mentioned to us today, it's the real question of who will fold first. Nonetheless, as you mentioned, this is creating a lot of anxiety, not just here in China, but across the entire regions. Markets are not looking at this favorably. We saw declines across many of the markets in Asia, including Japan, which of course is home to the auto giants, including Toyota and Honda. Wolf.
Hi, Mark Stewart in Beijing for us. Mark, thanks very much. Pamela.
And stock markets in Europe also took a tumble after President Trump announced 20% tariffs on imports from the EU. So let's go live now to Paris and CNN senior international correspondent Melissa Bell. Melissa, how big of a blow are these tariffs to Europe?
Look, a senior European official has been talking to me just a short while ago about the figures. They were handed this 30-page document yesterday. Europeans are contesting a bunch of the figures. They say that it's full of mistakes. There are things that have been seen applied, tariffs applied to them twice. Overall, what Europeans are saying is that if you look at the last 3 rounds of tariffs that have been applied to them, it is 70% of all European goods that will head to the United States that are now the subject of tariffs. That is 380 billion euros worth of goods. So it's a huge blow to the European Union. And what's interesting is that the Commission is saying on one hand that it's going to seek to negotiate. The high-level negotiations with Washington begin, we understand, even tomorrow afternoon. But at the same time, they're really preparing for a war. They say that they did not start, but that they are ready to wage. And what they say their biggest asset is the biggest single market in the world. So 450 million consumers that they say they're going to protect, but also use in their fight. So things like, for instance, sourcing soybeans elsewhere than the United States, motorcycles, the sort of goods that you would expect them to seek to buy from other partners in the United States. But more than that, the Commission has a bunch of more measures, retaliatory measures up its sleeve that could hurt, for instance, big tech that make, say, Europeans 30% of their profits in the EU. Europeans are preparing to fight back, and to fight back quite aggressively, Pam.
Crazy times, guys. I told you, total chaos. And I want to look at the math here with you as well, because we're going to debunk some of the math equations that he came up with about how this would work. How much will tariffs raise prices? Let's just go ahead and dive into that. This is coming from economists here. Now, it says here that President Trump announced his latest tariffs on Wednesday. He also ignited an economic mystery. Just where in the world did those numbers come from? He pointed to a new 34% tax on imports from China, the EU, a tax of 20% of Vietnam, 46% of India, etc. You guys can see the rest here. But it says here that Trump claimed that these reciprocal tariffs reflect how other countries already tax American products. That means they do it to us and we do it to them. Very simple. That is not true. These are not reciprocal tariffs. They do not correspond with the tariff rates in other countries. The truth behind where these tariffs came from is far more interesting. And I want to jump down to this part here, the math. This is the Trump administration tariff formula as revealed on Wednesday night by the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative. So we're doing some math here. Behind those Greek letters, there's a blunt but understandable approach. Essentially, the equation is trying to answer the question, how high should we set tariffs in order to get Americans to buy fewer foreign products and close the trade deficit? This math says the more of a trade deficit the U.S. has with another country, the higher that tariff should be on that country's products. Here's an example. If you look at China, last year, Americans imported about 439 billion of products from China, mainly electronics, clothing, machinery, while exporting only 144 billion. According to this formula, a 67% tax on those Chinese products should correct this trade imbalance. So it says the math would work like this. The 67% tax should raise the prices of Chinese products in the United States, and those higher prices should discourage Americans from buying Chinese products or products that contain Chinese components. Here's the problem. As I said before, we don't produce much here. This includes materials as well, not just their products. So keep that in mind. Now it says here, but according to Trump's math, the tariffs are supposed to raise prices because those higher prices are the driving force that will close the trade deficit. There's a couple of major assumptions in Trump's math. The biggest assumption involves that how much the tariffs would cause prices to go up. Here, the administration makes an eyebrow-raising admission. It guesses that for every 10% hike in tariffs, there will be a 2.5 increase in prices. Translation: Trump's economists think that about a quarter of his tariffs will be passed on to American consumers in the form of higher prices. It goes on to say here, going back to China, for example, here's how it would all play out. According to his math, the 67% tariff on Chinese products will cause prices of those products to go up by 16.75%. By coincidence, the administration also assumes that for every 10% increase in the price of foreign products, there will be a 40% decrease in how much Americans buy. So faced with a 16.75% higher prices, Trump expects Americans to decrease their purchases by 4 times that amount, which brings us back to the 67%. What is wrong with his math? Certainly, these new tariffs are not reciprocal tariffs, but the math behind them is not wholly invented or nonsensical, despite what some online have claimed. In fact, for the first time ever, the administration is explicitly acknowledging of some of the basic economic logic of tariffs. Tariffs do raise prices, and higher prices do cause people to buy less stuff. And if Americans buy less foreign stuff, then American trade deficit with other countries will narrow. But that's not to say that any of Trump's tariff calculations arrive at the right answer. For one, these are very rough, back of the envelope calculations. As laid out, this formula treats every trading partner, every good, and every industry the same. Bananas, oil, clothing, computers, or cars. It doesn't matter what a country sends to the U.S. More importantly, the formula hinges on a big assumption about how much tariffs will raise prices. His math assumes that only a quarter of tariffs would be passed on to American consumers in the form of higher prices. But economists who have studied Trump's tariffs in 2018 on steel and aluminum and various products from China calculate that almost all of those tariffs ended up being passed on to Americans. So, yeah, I mean, it is going to make more people decide not to purchase as much. But there are going to be situations where you're not going to have a choice because, like I said, we don't produce much here. So there are going to be situations where you are going to have to make a purchase. The auto parts is the easiest one to figure out. Like I said before, the auto parts, that's the easy one. Everybody knows you're going to be paying way more for that. So you hope that nothing happens to your car, hoping you don't have to get your car fixed. But then there's other materials that are used in the products that you buy that are not from this country. So the fact that it is April and this is already happening, like this is insane. And I think this is also kind of connected to what happened in Wisconsin a little bit, because the reality is, and I'll get to that when I get to that story, it's not that the Democrats have done something so great to win in Wisconsin during that special election. It's more so that Donald Trump's administration has not fulfilled his promises about the economy that he ran on. So it is his actions with the economy that is pushing people in the other direction. It's total chaos right now. Buckle up. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.